hello. I've arrived. Artist, archivist, future man, and tonight, theoretical, tactical, professional. Professional might be going a bit too far. Anyway. Hello. So, tonight we're thinking about Arknights more so than we are playing it per se. But yes. So, anyway, to go into a little bit more detail about what I mean by this patently, incredibly unusual thing to say. Actually, no. Business. Always forget about the business. So yes. So, tonight, again, we are thinking about Arknights. We might also play it. That, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that. We're definitely going to think about Arknights. But yes. Then, tomorrow, we won't actually be streaming, because I've had some work stuff get shifted around, which is... I don't know. It didn't get shifted around. I knew that it was coming, but work stuff is part of the reason why I'm a little bit late today. But yes, anyway. So, I did have some work stuff shifted around for the rest of the week, though, so I will not be streaming Tuesday. Instead, I plan to stream on Friday. But yes, so Friday and Saturday as per usual, and I think since I did want to do an extra stream this week due to having had to drop one last week, I think I might also aim to stream on Wednesday. But yes. So, anyway, with that, yes, tonight's stream, once again, we'll be talking about Arknights, we will be strategizing, and yeah, I haven't really thought about exactly what I want to do for that, but, that's why we're here, to start thinking about things. So yes, so Arknights strategy tonight. We may put some of our strategies to the test if we're able to come up with good ones. Yes, anyway, then for I've gotten myself turned around on when I'm streaming. Yes, Wednesday, yes it would be. Wednesday, we'll be playing Atelier Yumia once again. Then on, Friday, I guess I haven't decided yet. But yes, we'll get to that. I don't want to spend too much time here thinking about other things when there's a specific thing that I came here to think about. Anyway, then once again, Saturday we're planning on more Arknights. So yes, all streams you should expect to be around 7:30 p.m. Central Time, except for the Wednesday stream, which is more likely to be closer to 8 p.m., but we might be able to get it started a little bit early. Anyway, so yes. So, with all that, let me talk a little bit about what I was talking about, basically. So yes, so we've been stuck on Operation 611, and being stuck on an operation is not terribly unusual for me. Yeah, it is something that has happened quite a few times throughout the history of the stream, and I don't know, it's not a huge deal, but we've been making good progress lately, and I don't want to start stalling out again, basically. So rather than just go with trial and error, I suppose it's a very specific sort of trial and error that I do, but yeah, rather than that, I want to try and break things down a little bit more and come up with a better idea before we go into the actual game next time. Which again, could be today, if we come up with something good. But I suppose we can't know if it's good until we've tested it, but something that seems good on paper. I want to explore my ideas a little bit first before we actually start the game. But yeah, anyway. Basically, I'm saying all of this because I don't want to put the pressure on myself that I, have to try and get this solved today. I don't want to feel like I have to do it. Yes, I just want to do my best job of trying to understand the factors that are involved based on the information that I have and doing what I can with the tools that I have to solve those problems. But yes, so tonight's stream might end up a little bit short. I was a bit sick over the weekend. I'm feeling okay today. I'm feeling pretty good today. Yeah, I'm not unwell anyway, but my throat has been a little bit sore recently. Throat has been a little bit sore recently, so I might want to give that a rest at a certain point. But yes, I will have to also make sure to remember to drink plenty of water. But yes. So, other than that, yeah, I suppose that's more or less all the preamble we need. Let's get into things. So yes, I realize we don't have game audio. Technically, we don't have game video either, but it is there. It's just behind the canvas. Let's see. Do I have this set up properly? Yes, I do. Okay. Now I do anyway. So yes. So, once again, we need to figure out what we are doing with Operation 611. So, the issue that we've had so far is basically everything. But yeah, more specifically, I had been assuming that the main issue was the frost drones. And I'll try and get some art assets in here to elucidate my points. But yes, I want to get a map of 611 here, so hold on. But yes, so Operation 611 is the main difficulty. So yeah, we've gotten stuck here after having made some good progress on other maps recently. All right, here we are. All right, that's a little bit small, but here we are. Sufficient for our purposes. So yes, so this is a map of the level, and what we need to do then is figure out what we're going to do about this. So yes, so generally speaking, this is sort of a problem I've had for a long time, is that I tend to focus a lot on stalling strategies. So I'll usually place defenders, about here. Let's give them a shield shape. Yeah. Defenders in positions like these. Not necessarily this on this map specifically, but usually, I will try to block whatever lanes I can with defenders. Then whatever enemies will come will, go and get stuck on the defenders, ideally. And this works reasonably well. Usually I'll also have a sniper. I don't remember what the icon for the sniper class is now that I think about it. But yeah, anyway. So I'll usually have a sniper or something of the sort. I think it's like a crossbow, something to that effect. Yeah, have a sniper covering a lot of this area as well. And I could probably use an effect to put some, make these stand out a little bit more. Because I noticed that the yellow in particular doesn't stand out very well against the background here. All right. That should be better. Not necessarily in every place, though. This should be better yet. Alright, we're working on this. Again, it's kind of experimental all the way down. But yes. And this should do it. One of these. There we are. So this should pop out a little bit better. That pops out a bit too much. Okay. And that's not quite enough. That's fine. Okay, anyway. So yeah, so again, you'll have the sniper covering this area. Usually we would have more than one. We'd have our medics, over yonder covering this space as well. But yeah, and so with all of that, we have our units and we have some sort of variation on this sort of strategy. And I did, previously learn that guards are pretty good. Full stop. But anyway, I learned more specifically that guards are pretty good at DPS and usually have, honestly, a fair amount more DPS than snipers do in a lot of cases, which is not something I had thought of previously. But, you know, it kind of makes sense intuitively because a guard is going to be in more danger. I just sort of always assumed from starting the game. Yeah, I had always assumed that. I'd sort of thought of it in the same way that I think of other tower defense games, where I think of anything that you put on the enemy's path is mostly just there to delay them, and it's the ranged units that are mostly the thing that, or the ranged, you know, the actual towers. They would be in an actual tower, or in a more traditional tower defense game. Yes, the towers themselves being what kills the enemies. But yeah, so this is not necessarily universally true, though. Sit. Because yes, as I was getting at, you know, this is not the same sort of tower defense game as, I don't know. What's a good way to describe it? I don't know. It's not, you know, Bloons or whatnot. I say that as though I have played Bloons to any great degree. I don't think I've played any of the Bloons tower defense games. I've played the non-tower defense Bloons games. I've played at least one of them. Anyway. We're getting off topic a little bit. Yes. So as I was saying, once again, the strategy that I have been employing, yes, improved from there. I got a better idea of the fact that guards were pretty good and worth using, but I never really moved past the idea of stalling with defenders. And so far, it has become pretty clear that we're just not killing things fast enough in this stage. You know, we're getting a lot of enemies are blocking or like being blocked, and a lot of them are getting past us as well, eventually. But yeah, whenever there's too many, they just get by and there's nothing we can really do about it. But yes. So, we want to renew our strategy a little bit. I want to renew my strategy a little bit. So I'm thinking one thing that could be worth trying, and I'm going to have a different layer for notes here, but one thing that I think could be worth trying is to... Yes, less reliance on defenders. So I want to use defenders a little bit less in this operation in particular, because again, just running out of not having enough DPS to kill things fast enough is a huge deal that we're running into. And since we have so many enemies, they are causing all sorts of problems. You know, we're having the casters freezing our units. We're having the slugs explode at inopportune times. Yeah, and all that. Yeah, it's all just sort of a big, unfortunate problem. So yes, so that is one major thing I want to work on, having a strategy that's less reliant on defenders. So yeah, so another thing to keep in mind is that there are 8 deployment slots. We'll just put DS for that. We can have 8 units on the field at a time. And yeah, we can have 8 units on the field at a time, and we need to, yeah, you know, we have 12 units in our roster. Again, another sort of trap that I tend to fall into is I tend to rely very heavily on just sort of, you know, deploying my units, you know, however I deploy them. Yeah, just deploy them wherever, however, and then just never moving them. Yeah, I tend to be very inflexible. I want to try to find a strategy that I can place everything in a specific order in a specific location and just have them stay there forever. And that's not necessarily a bad thing per se, or rather, it's not a bad thing to have that be a solution, but it's a bad thing if that's the only solution that you're willing to, you know, settle for. But yeah, generally the only real exception to that is that I will usually have, I will have a couple of vanguards on the field, that will then get retreated later on. But up until the point where they do get retreated, or rather after the point that they get retreated, usually we don't make any other changes to the lineup of operators that are on the field. Part of it is just sort of the idea that in order to get the most value out of the operators you have, you want to make sure all of them are on the field, which is not untrue. But, again, you can't have all of them on the field at a time. So, if we only use, these 10 operators or whatnot, I suppose in this mission I've only been using 1 Vanguard, so we've only been making use of 9 operators. Yeah, if we only use the 9, then we're not getting good value out of the entire team. And moreover, if we have all of our deployment slots filled, that means that we can't drop any specialists if we need to, use an executor or something like that. But yeah, so again, we want to having as many units on the field as possible is good insofar as that gives us the most, in theory, the most DPS and the most healing and the most blocking and all that. But again, it's not a goal to shoot for, it's just sort of a thing. Something that we can do if we have the opportunity and the desire. But yeah. So again, one of the biggest issues on this map are the explosive slugs, whom I will draw as so. But yeah, the explosive slugs are a big issue, in particular because they don't do a whole lot on their own, but they do inflict cold. A lot of things in this mission do, of course. But yeah, they inflict cold, and usually we don't get so many of the explosive slugs out at a time that they are, what freezes. Instead, the Yeti casters, I don't remember what they look like off the top of my head, so we're just going to go with this little wizard-looking man. Do they have, eyes? I don't think they do, but it looks cuter if I draw them with eyes. So anyway, so the Yeti casters, yes, the ICs, YC. Yes. Yeah, the Yeti casters and the explosive slugs work together to cause horrible problems for us. But they are the best of friends in this regard. So yes. So again, the Yeti casters on their own don't cast fast enough to be able to freeze. And the slugs can only inflict cold once, of course, because they inflict it when they explode. So yes. So, because of that, if we've already got the Yeti casters having, inflicted cold on our front line, I don't know what I would use to indicate cold. I guess another snowflake. But yes, anyway, once they've inflicted cold on our front line, then a slug can come in and explode. Yeah. Explode, and that freezes everybody. Everybody in the front line and whatnot. And often it also freezes whoever's behind them and around them as well. And, there's a certain amount of... Yeah, basically this is what I'm trying to figure out a way to avoid. Preventing these sort of clusters of freezes from essentially just completely shutting down our units. And so to this point, I've been doing a little bit of study lately. I've been looking into the units that I have and that I want to use a little bit more to determine which ones I think would be... Generally, I want to learn more about what units I have and what they can do, because that's something I am not, admittedly not very familiar with. But yeah, there's a lot of units I have, I just don't remember the fact that I have them, and a lot of the ones that I do know that I have, I don't know how to make good use of them. For instance, again, with the frost drones, I absolutely have no recollection of what the frost drone looks like, so we're just going to assume it looks something like this. Yes, the frost drone, again, I had sort of assumed that, again, snipers would be the answer to dealing with the frost drone. And, Meteor is a pretty decent way to deal with them. She does probably the best damage of any of our snipers against them, but she on her own wasn't quite enough, and neither was she enough with the addition of crews. So again, I had thought about using a caster for this purpose, but I, thought, we're not going to have a caster within range, or that's, going to be within range, but also not be within the range of the frost drone's cold aura. I'll put a little, waves around it. Yeah, I was thinking we wouldn't have a unit that could be, or a caster that would be, let's see, what do we want to use for a caster? This is fine, I think. I had assumed that we wouldn't have a caster that would be close enough to be able to attack, but not close enough that they would get within the aura. And I was wrong on both counts, kind of. Because again, I was thinking that the range of casters was just sort of like this. I think it's, one more. I was thinking it was just like this with the actual caster themselves right here. Put that in yellow so it stands out a little bit more. And while that is broadly true, it's not completely true because they do, I guess we're at the end of the canvas here. So let's shrink this a little bit. All right. So I was assuming that they would, again, I would not have one that could both be within range, but not be within range of the frost drones. Oh. All right, there we go. Yeah, not be within range of the frost drone's cold aura. Because I figured, if they're within the range of the aura, then they're not going to be able to contribute. But, again, the truth is that core casters, at least, once they're promoted, have this extra tile here, which does put them outside of the range of the frost drone. Which is all well and good. But, again, I guess, sort of we'll put it in another layer here. Hide these real quick. It's going to be a nightmare keeping all these layers straight in my head, but such is the way of things. So again, we've been using Steward, and he is the best choice for this. But we were using Steward, or we were trying to use Steward here. To get this range for the frost drone. But the issue with it is that the frost drone actually stays here in this spot. Or at least they stay somewhere that they're not within Steward's range here. So I have to assume it's here. So because of that, we had to move Steward forward anyway, and this tile is within the frost drone's cold aura. And so again, I figured, well, that's a disaster, I'm getting things a little bit mixed up. Because again, I just sort of dismissed the idea of using a caster entirely at first. Then, and I also dismissed it because I didn't think that we would have any casters who would preferentially target the frost drone. And while I don't have a caster that preferentially targets, drones, we do have Steward who preferentially targets the target with the highest defense. And in this level, in every instance, that is the frost drone. Yes, frost drone has the most defense of any enemy in this mission. So again, I didn't realize at first that Steward had this ability. I didn't realize this until after the stream that the first stream that we had gotten stuck on 611. So again, after that, I tried to put Steward here specifically, in this tile specifically, in this specific way, but we found that the frost drone was outside of his range. So again, we had to move him forward, which isn't itself a huge deal, because again, another thing that I figured out off stream doing some math is that Steward's damage output is actually, significant enough that even with the Frost Drone applying its attack speed slow, he can still do more DPS than Meteor. Again, we weren't taking into account either of their skills, which was definitely a mistake on my part. Yeah, definitely a mistake on my part. I just sort of didn't have a good idea of how to do the math to incorporate their skills, and so I just kind of gave up on that preemptively. Yeah, I realize now that what I could have done is I probably could have, done calculations assuming, you make a certain number of attacks, because both of them have abilities that activate every certain number of attacks. You do a certain number of attacks, average the damage between those, and then use that to calculate the DPS. But, again, at first I didn't really have a good idea of how to go about doing that. And again, Meteors also has the added effect that, not only is the 5th or 4th or whatever attack, more powerful, it also inflicts a defense debuff. So it was more complicated than was easy for me to conceptualize in my head. So again, I just completely ignored the factor of both of their skills to make things more simple for me. And while I don't necessarily expect to... I don't think I need to do that much math or anything of the sort going forward. I don't plan to necessarily. At least not until I get a better idea of how I would do DPS calculations like this. Again, I don't think we should need to do calculations that precisely for the most part. Anyway, a lot of it is just sort of minutia, but the bigger part of it is just the fact that looking at the Frost Drone, it didn't intuitively occur to me, because again, the Frost Drone has I believe it was a B rank in defense, and then I don't know what icon we'll use for resistance. Yes, and it had a B+ in resistance. We'll just write out res. Yes, so it has a B in defense and a B+ in resistance. So intuitively, I looked at that and I thought, I guess it's more weak to physical damage than it is to arts damage. But again, that is not the case, because it has 500 defense and 30 resistance. So again, I can't think of a single ranged unit I have that has an attack higher than 500. Actually, it might have 600 defense now that I think about it. We definitely don't have one with an attack over 600. So again, we have these big numbers, or this big disparity And again, the thought that casters would be less efficient for this purpose sort of seemed intuitive to me, given what I had seen, but I had to actually look at the stats of the unit to see what the actual issue was, what the actual numbers were. But yes, I realized that I did not abbreviate defense correctly. Oh well. I'm not very proficient at writing and talking at the same time. But yes, not very proficient at typing and talking at the same time either. Anyway, not relevant. So yes, so again, I came to this wrong conclusion thinking, casters, or rather, its resistance is graded higher than its defense. So presumably its resistance is going to be more impactful than its defense. And, with this amount of defense, it's effectively reducing, I don't remember the exact number, but I believe it's 5% of the damage minimum. No matter how much defense an enemy has, they will never reduce an attack to below 5% of the damage it would normally do. But yeah, so again, most of the time with our physical damage dealing units, we are doing about 5% of their, 5% of their damage. Whereas with our casters, we would be doing 70%. And so again, it's a big difference, even though in theory, the B+ implies that it's more impactful. And that's sort of what it is intuitively. I know consciously, when I actually stop to think about it, I know consciously that, these are not the same. So when it's saying that it has a B+ resistance, what it's saying is that, if we assume, say, F tier resistance is 0, it goes up and up and up until it gets to B+, which is around 30. Yeah, so again, enemies just sort of tend to have even relatively high resistance on an enemy isn't that high. But yeah, you do have enemies that have like really, really high resistances, but that's once you're into like the S+ territory and things like that. But yeah, it's very, very rare that an enemy is going to have enough resistance that they're going to take, less than 50% or so of the damage from an arts attack. Whereas it's not uncommon for enemies to have defense enough that they reduce the attack of snipers to, 50% or less, even if they don't have particularly high defense. Yes. So yeah. So in general, playing this game, I've not done a great job of sort of working through problems logically. Usually what I tend to do is, rather than sort of try and come up with a very different strategy, usually what I do is I try to refine the strategy that I currently have, which is to say I mostly focus on the timing and order that I deploy units in. And this has also had some good results. For instance, the fight against the Essence of Evolution during Operation Originium Dust was extremely tight. Like, using Pinecone's skill at the wrong time, it was like the difference between whether or not we win the mission or not. Yeah, like a single individual skill activation was enough on that mission to spell success or failure. But it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. Not every mission is going to be a situation where if I just get the exact right timing and deploy all my units in the exact right order, that we're going to have, a good result. Because most missions don't really care about timing that much. Basically, just as long as you have your units on the field before the enemies get past where you would put them, it's more or less fine. But yeah, but again, my first instinct is to try and sort of finesse it. Try to be very precise, increasingly precise with how I place my units, how I activate their skills, and other things like that. But yeah, I tend to try to finesse things before I try to rethink things. Because I have the sort of, again, it's sort of intuitive to me, even though it is wrong, demonstrably, but it's sort of intuitive to me that the fastest solution, or rather, yeah, it's intuitive to me that I want to avoid, changing my team in any way, because that means, stepping out of the mission, changing things around. I keep thinking, or I always sort of think, like, what makes me hesitate on doing that is the thought that it would take more time to change my strategy than I would save by changing it. And sometimes that can be true, and sometimes that's not true. But, once we get to the point where I've spent, 1 hour, 2 hours, an entire stream, attempting the same stage over and over again with the same team, the same levels, then definitely by that point, I should have been willing to admit that, just finessing it isn't going to cut it. It's not going to solve the problem. But yes. So, again, all of this is to say I need to be more willing to make more changes faster, to iterate upon the team rather than simply setting a team and only using those specific units. Yeah, and again, not focusing so much on deploying them in the exact right order, the exact right position at the exact right time. Because again, there's just going to be some situations where it doesn't matter when you place them or how you place them. You're just not going to win, basically. Yeah, so again, for instance, with our previous strategy of using Meteor. Yes, Meteor Meteor was here, right? And Cruise. Yeah, our strategy of using both of them on the Frost Drone. Yeah, just even if they were both on the field before the Frost Drone got to its point here, they would never be able to deal enough damage to it before it left. And there was just nothing we could do about that. Like, no amount of better positioning, no amount of better anything. Neither of them had any skills that could be manually activated. Meteor's skill 2 does have a manual activation, but I don't think it would be any better in this case than the alternative. But yeah, so again, no amount of finesse would solve this problem. The only way that we have solved it so far, again, is by switching in Steward instead of Cruise. Meteor in the same position. Because again, for whatever reason, the Frost Drone is just outside of his range. Actually, Casters. It might have been. Oh wait, no, hold on. Because right, I had Steward back here previously, so his range would have been like so. But yes, it's not that now. It is this. Hence why he is able to hit the drone, which is again approximately here. It doesn't look like it's here. It looks like it's here, but it's high enough above this point, far enough up, that it isn't affected if he only has this range covered, But yeah, so again, switching operators did solve the problem. I'd assumed that the DPS difference would be significant enough that we could just rely on purely Steward. But again, I was underestimating the amount of damage that Meteor does with the use of her first skill. Yeah, I just sort of, again, had written their skills off as not being relevant. Yeah, which was a very, very foolish thing to do. Because yeah, again, we needed both of them in order to be able to take the drone down, and not even by a small margin. Though I think Steward did get close to what Cruise and Meteor were able to do together, I think. But again, he wasn't able to solve the problem all on his own. So yeah, so again, this brings us to sort of the next problem. That is that our units are just too clustered. I tend to place them all around here, usually in a formation not unlike this. And yeah, that's all 8. Sometimes we'll have a space vacant so that we could, in theory, make use of waifus who we've been using. But, broadly speaking, this is sort of the general idea. And again, the frontward positions are taken up by defenders who, take damage admirably, but they aren't able to deal damage effectively. And again, with our sniper and caster here, they can only really cover sort of these... Oops. Yeah, they can only cover these tiles, more or less, which has left this one uncovered. And obviously we could move this unit over to here. But again, that still leaves us with the problem that we're not doing that much damage here specifically. And all these doodles are getting a little bit confusing at this point, so we'll cut back a little bit. So yeah, so again, as I was alluding to earlier, I don't think I ever made this point specifically, but as I was alluding to, rather than just defenders, I want to try and make use of more guards. I think the guard icon is a sword. I can probably look it up. I can definitely look it up. I have Arknights open. I have Arknights open right now. But yes. It is indeed a sword. It's not a sword in that specific angle, but it is a sword. But yes. This is... I guess it doesn't matter, but this is closer to what it looks like. The sword does have a point. There we go. But yeah, so using guards in these positions rather than defenders will probably be helpful. Yeah, we've been using 2 medics here. Actually, the medic icon isn't that either. Medic icon is closer to this, with a little bit of extra in between as well. Not quite that squiggly, but anyway. Not unlike the snowflakes that I was drawing earlier. Anyway. So, 2 medics, approximately here, covering this field, which is not bad either. Though there's another thought on medics that I want to share. But yes, where was I? Right. So yeah, so again, I want to try to use defenders, or I want to try to use guards rather than defenders. And another thing that I want to do is I want to try and spread out these 2 lanes, basically. So rather than like this, it would probably be more effective to arrange things. I guess some of these I haven't really decided upon. But yeah, probably more like maybe this. And then have our medic down here. But yeah, probably this is probably going a little bit too far, because we ideally do want enemies to be within range of the ranged units here. Yeah, I was just sort of thinking of this because I didn't want the, Yeti casters to be able to target our medic very much. But yeah, so again, placing our guard a little bit further back is probably going to be more effective here. And I think in the same vein, let's see, we do need to get rid of one of these. Yes, in the same vein, yeah, placing these units, I don't know exactly which of these I will be deploying and which ones I won't. Yeah, placing these units a little bit further back to make sure that there's very little chance of anything untoward happening. And again, we will mark, yes, mark this tile with a medic icon. There we go. But yeah, so having a medic here, yeah, these 2 slots, again, we mostly have them there to deal with the frost drone. So once we have that dealt with, we can actually remove them probably. So we'll put a little stopwatch icon. But yes, have them there temporarily and then swap them out later. But yeah, so again, with that, the enemies have been going in these patterns. Yeah, these patterns. Then it goes through there. Yeah. And then onward. Things do come out of these places sometimes, but I haven't really paid much attention to that. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to what enemies are specifically in what lanes, but I do believe that the one of the units that comes out of here are the armored soldiers. Yeah, they in particular, I kind of want to give them a head, but I feel like that's making the doodle a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. Anyway, the armored soldiers are a problem that wants to be dealt with arch damage, of course, because they have high defense in particular. Not as high as the frost drone, but they do still have high defense. But yeah, so those are a problem that will mostly stay on the bottom lane from what I've seen. I don't remember seeing any on the top lane, though it could be. I do remember we've usually been placing more. We've tended to place more of our DPS on the top lane than on the bottom lane. So it could be that they're just getting killed faster. Plus, usually we have Steward here. Yes, this is a rough approximation of the caster icon, incidentally. But yeah. And then the sniper icon is in fact a crossbow. But yeah. So again, we've had more of our DPS on the top lane, so it could just be that they're there too, but I've just not been seeing them much because they've been dying faster. But yeah, anyway, all of this is to say that I think that on the lower edge, I think that is where we would want to deploy a arts fighter. And currently the only one that I have that is especially powerful is Moose. I suppose we also have Astesia, but Moose is stronger right now. And I do feel like Moose is probably going to be a little bit better in general, because one thing that also comes on this lower lane, at least from what I've seen, are the ice cleavers. So yes, the guys with the big swords. So yes, the ice cleavers tend to come down this lane. I say ice cleavers. I've only ever seen one in the mission. It's possible that the other one will spawn on the other lane. That seems like an interesting way to make it more challenging. But anyway, so again, I was here to talk about why I want to use Moose specifically. And the main reason is because of her first skill, which decreases enemy attack, which I think would be useful. So yeah, so again, in general, I'm going to erase the lines I've been using for enemies, because now I want to focus a little bit more on what I want to deploy and where. So yeah. So again, for this, we will indicate that this is Moose specifically. So yes. Her hair's kind of puffy. Mostly out of her face, but this is an unnecessary amount of detail, but I'm going to put it in anyway. Anyway, so yes. So Moose, roughly here. Yeah, again, being able to reduce enemy attack and whatnot, while also doing a good amount of arch damage. Probably we are going to want another unit behind her. I'm thinking mostly for our extra enemy elimination. This is a very strange looking chainsaw. Yeah, I'm thinking of mostly using Centurions for that. I know the Centurion icon is a chainsaw. I don't know if it looks like this specifically, but I do remember that it's a chainsaw. But yes, so having a Centurion behind Moose I think would be especially good to catch some of the things that get by her. Yeah, so again, with all of these here, that's 3, that's 2. Yeah, that brings us up to 5 units. Then we have, again, these who are going to be, in theory, temporary. Yeah, we don't necessarily need them at first, and we don't necessarily need them in the long term. They will still probably be useful, but again, they aren't essential, I would say. All right, we do have a ad break coming up. So, I'm not going to start it early, I don't think. Not going to start it early necessarily, anyway. I feel like Moose looks a little bit weird without eyes here. And she looks especially weird if they're hugely asymmetrical like that. Anyway. So yes. So Moose, like so. The more I draw this, the more I want to put more detail in it. But again, this is just for demonstration purposes. I don't have enough time to actually make something that looks like something. Anyway. So yes. So again, Moose, Centurion, another guard of some sort here. I'm thinking probably a Dreadnought for their higher HP and thus ability to withstand more casters. Well, yeah, so another thought in general is I want to try to make use of a new, or rather not necessarily new, but I want to do something a little bit different with our medics. Because previously we've mostly just been using, my standard strategy of one normal medic, one medic, as the game calls them, one medic, and one multi-target medic. Which is not bad per se, but it's not necessarily always applicable. So what I want to do instead is I want to try to make use of Pure Stream, because I've learned that Pure Stream actually is able to give status resistance to those she heals, which is not an unknown thing, status resistance anyway. Like, we know that Blaze can get status resistance once she's at Elite 2, but I didn't know that it was possible to inflict, I say inflict as though it's something negative, I didn't know that it was possible to grant status resistance to an ally through normal means, basically, through the use of just sort of healing, as Pure Stream is able to do. But yes, I figured, I don't know, I just never really thought of it as a factor. And again, that's another sort of shortcoming of mine, just the fact that I don't broadly know what a lot of the classes and subclasses do. So yeah, so again, Pure Stream is what is known as a therapist medic. So they have a wider range. Yeah, they have a wider range, not unlike the type of medic that Honeyberry is. I think she's a wandering medic. But yeah, they have a wider healing range once they have been promoted. And I think it's not any longer, it's just wider. But yes. Anyway. Where was I? Right. So Pure Stream can give status resistance whenever she heals someone. And what status resistance does, which is another thing that I didn't know specifically, status resistance reduces the amount of time that you have a status condition by half. Which again should be a pretty huge benefit to us, because it's not like we're constantly being frozen necessarily. It's not like we're constantly being made cold. Yeah, it happens infrequently enough, for instance, again, that a single caster on their own isn't able to freeze a unit. And a single, or rather, again, these slugs usually don't spawn two to a lane such that they would both be an issue with regards to freezing and whatnot. But yeah, so again, we need to be sort of mindful of how we position our units. Yeah, we'd probably want the caster or the medic to be a little bit further back here. Yeah, behind Moose. Whoop. There we are. But yeah, and with, if we were to place Pure Stream here, which I don't know we're going to do that specifically, but if we were, she would be able to even heal if they were out here, because they, again, have a wider range. The ad break has started, but so we'll, go into a short break here as well. Alright, I have returned. So yes, so again, assuming that this medic down here is pure stream, she would have a range of about, of like so. Then with the tile extension from being a therapist, she would be able to heal like so. So the areas that are in yellow, these extra tiles, the healing that they do is reduced by 20% down to 80%, which is a bit of an issue, but it's not necessarily an insurmountable problem. So we'll get rid of all that once again. So something like this I think would be good. Again, at this point, once the Frost Drone is gone, we'll probably want to get rid of those units to have a slightly more flexible lineup. I will place another guard. I'll place another guard here. I don't know which one necessarily, but one of them. Yes, another guard here. So I think, actually, to make that work, we would need to put them forward, but we wouldn't be able to put them forward because, I guess we'll need to have the guard in the back here first, and then have this one go here. I'll get rid of these lines as well. So that, okay, now that I think about it, that also causes a problem because then, that's going to block these units, which I guess isn't not necessarily a problem. It could be one, but I don't know what comes out of there now that I think about it. Anyway, I guess we could also make use of a guard who has some sort of self-healing ability. Some sort of self-healing ability. Anyway. So yes. So with something like this, that leaves us with a lineup that uses 6 of our units. Again, we're going to have Scavenger. We're going to have Scavenger roughly here at some point. We're going to make use of Vigna. Actually, Scavenger, Vigna. Do we want to make use of Vigna? That's a question. Because it's also another thing that we should keep in mind is we do need to plan around the fact that the mission is not going to look like this the whole time. Because again, we're going to start out with casters here and here, slugs here and here, and I think casters here and here, I believe. No, actually, these ones on the bottom here, or in the back here. I guess they are also on the bottom, but yes, these ones in the back here are back further. I think the rest of these are accurate, though. Actually, no, these slugs are down one also. I feel like the caster positioning is also a little bit off now too. Anyway, it doesn't matter that much. And I should also indicate that there are 2 slugs. Give them some legs so that we know that they're slugs, because slugs have legs, of course. Yes, 2. So yes, there's 2 of them in each tile that we have to deal with. Then again, we have these guys. So the range on these casters is approximately 2 tiles, I think. That's not necessarily the best circle I've ever drawn. Anyway, that's better. So it's approximately 2 tiles. This is not quite 2 tiles on the bottom here, but I guess those tiles aren't going to be deployed on, so it's approximately 2 tiles. So all of these tiles here, I think, are in danger from this caster. And all the ones up here are in danger from both casters. So yeah, so again, we've mostly been dealing with that by, deploying, say, Frostleaf or Midnight here to deal with them. We're probably going to need to figure out something slightly different, though. Slightly different than what we've been doing. I've been deploying both of them, but I think, again, we've learned that they're not necessarily that big of a deal initially. Yeah, they aren't that big of a priority to kill, essentially, more so than anything. Yeah, I suppose another thing we have to consider is we want to have, all of these. We want to be able to place Scavenger, like about here or so. We want to be able to block this lane. We want to have, our Lord Guard or whoever we deploy, here and or here. So this means that we are going to need to place our first medic about here. We'll just make use of that as the medic icon for right now. Yeah, we'll need our first medic about there to be able to cover, this general area. Since we've been using yellow for the enemies, I suppose we'll keep using it for these. Make them a little bit more yellow so it's easier to tell at a glance. But yes, so again, we need to cover this area. Yeah, I think probably we want to deploy here after we deploy here, and we want to start with Meteor here or so. We might place Scavenger down here. It might not matter actually, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I suppose another thing to keep in mind is we could also place actually, so the Frost Drone is here. It is able to reach this tile, but not this tile. So that would imply that it has a range of, about, I think 3 it would be? No, not quite. Yeah, something like so. Yeah, in order to be able to hit this tile, but not this one. So yeah, so if that's correct, then these tiles here are actually going to be free from frost as well. So yeah, so we could theoretically deploy Steward here, maybe. Yeah, he would have not enough range to cover, actually. And if we place him here, that's really going out of our way. But yeah, if we place him here, that's really going out of our way to place him. And he's probably going to be in a lot of danger. Because yeah, again, in order to have a medic close enough, actually, if we place a medic here, they might not be within range of both casters. They're definitely within range of at least one, though. This might also be worth trying. So yeah, so I think I should probably get around to thinking of this in more concrete terms. I guess we don't necessarily need to think of it that much. Think of it that way that much. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I would also want to test, I think. I'll do some testing probably to figure some things out. I don't know. I don't think we're going to start the mission right now, though. Yeah, so again, a medic up here. Doing this actually does separate the lanes out even more, giving us a lot more leeway to make sure that these slug explosions don't completely destroy our entire defensive force. But yeah, having the medics more separated and less overlapping does mean that in an emergency, units will get less healing, but it does mean that they're less likely to target someone. They're more likely to target whoever, within their, well, would that be, I don't know. I feel like if they have if their ranges overlap, they could attack or they could heal the same target and like over heal them a little bit. Like heal them, there's no over heal, and that's the problem. Sort of waste some healing by, both targeting the same healing target at about the same time, and one of them healing them when they're already pretty healed. And again, just sort of not necessarily prioritizing our units as we would like them. So yes. Placing Scavenger up top, or not Scavenger, Steward up top also gives us... What does it give us? Actually, hold on. No. Okay, I was going to say, if we deploy him here, he'd have this range, but no, the range starts where he is. So it would give him this range. Oddly drawn, but anyway. Yeah, so it would give him this range, which we don't want because that's not where the Frost Drone is. But yeah, again, if we want to make sure that he is not getting hit by it, he needs to be deployed here. But deploying him here puts him in danger of, a lot of casters. And he does have resistance, but he's not going to have that much resistance. Not have enough resistance to deal with all of them. And I suppose, again, since we're using yellow for enemies, we'll mark the Frost Drone in yellow. Put an F on it. Yes. But yeah. I guess again we could also place Steward not immediately, just like after we have dealt with the casters up there. So I don't remember when they start moving relative to when the Frost Drone comes in, now that I think about it. But yes. So, with that then, again we have an idea of how we can better split up our forces. We have an idea of where we want to place our guards to a certain extent. Meteor and Steward, I think, are probably still our best DPS options for dealing with the Frost Drone. Again, killing the Frost Drone didn't kind of solve the mission like I was expecting it to when I first decided to hard focus on it. Yeah, it didn't solve the mission per se. But, again, I think we are going to need to prioritize killing it if we want to be able to do things efficiently. But yeah, so again, the Frost Drone will have the attack speed of all of our units while it is within range. So again, it is possible that rather than focusing on guards in the way that we have been, well, it could go either way. Either we want to try and focus on putting as many of our guards as possible outside of the Frost Drone's range, which again seems to be approximately 2 tiles. Yeah, approximately 2 tiles in radius. Something like this. I feel like, I don't know. I guess I need to, yes, make note of the points where it would intersect with the grid to make this a little bit easier on myself. But yes, this is we could place our units in such a way that, say, we'd have a guard here. Yeah, have a guard here. The sketches are getting increasingly sketchy, but yeah, guard here, then guards over here. Yes, guards over here to deal with some of these issues while again staying outside of the range of the Frost Drone and thus not suffering from its effects so much. So yeah, we do only have one Pure Stream, of course, because she is a unique individual, just like everyone else. So we need to sort of decide where we want to prioritize status resistance. I feel like it's probably going to be, we're probably going to want to prioritize it in the area where we're going to want to prioritize status resistance on the Actually, I think, I was going to initially say that we would want to prioritize it on the further units. But now that I think about it, we probably want to prioritize it on, or rather, okay. I was initially thinking we would want to prioritize putting status resistance on the units on the lower level, because those are the ones that are, again, from what we've seen, that is where the first ice cleaver spawns at least. I don't know if the second one does or doesn't spawn there. I do know that there are 2 of them from looking at the mission on the wiki. But yes, I don't know if they spawn in both lanes or if they only spawn in the one lane. Yeah. I feel like I'm losing steam a little bit. Yeah, maybe I do need to call it for right now. As I was thinking, have a fairly short stream today. Ugh. Anyway. So yeah, so the furthest one forward, well, no, I was going to say the furthest one forward would be exposed to casters the most. And while that is kind of true, the second, once they're out of range of the first, all the casters that move there are going to focus more on the second. But I guess, again, the second one is the only one that, in theory, assuming that we kill the casters fast enough, yes, the second, yeah, the furthest back line of defense should, in theory, only have 1 lane's worth of casters focusing on it at any point, whereas the first line of defense will have 2 lanes of casters focusing on it for at least part of its lifespan. Yeah, before they move on. So again, whoever we place here is going to get shot by casters from this lane and this lane. But ideally, those casters will then get stopped and will get stopped and be killed, whereas these ones will necessarily pass on until they reach whoever we put down here. But again, at that point, ideally, they will be stopped and be killed, and we won't have other casters coming along here and then also shooting at them. So yeah, so the front one is probably the better to prioritize with Pure Stream. So yes, so we'll put this away and again write out some more notes. Like I said, keeping these layers straight is going to be an issue. I suppose we don't need most of this detailing here, but we'll move it out of the way rather than deleting it in case I want to reference these notes later. Oh, I don't have the right layer selected. That explains a lot. Alright. Would you be so kind as to allow me to select a layer, or select parts of a layer? Thank you. Alright, anyway. Yeah, so again, we already established less reliance on defenders. Yes. Status resistance in front. Yes, in front. Yes. Less permanence. Yes, less emphasis on permanence. Again, we want to sort of, in theory, put the ranged units that we have where they are to deal with the frost drone and have them there only long enough to get rid of the frost drone. Then once they have served that purpose, we can retreat them and replace them with other units. Yes, permanence. Yes. Again, if I'm talking while I am writing, I tend to forget where I am in a word and sort of skip a few letters here and there. Yes, less emphasis on permanence. Replace. Case in point. Yes, replace ranged units as needed. Separate these with lines. Anything else that we established here? I guess, again, less reliance on defenders, sort of implicitly, but we will draw the connection explicitly, means more guards. And then, status resistance, guards, defenders, permanents. I guess, yeah, one thing that I will do here is we'll go into the squads and refigure our squad a little bit. Because, yeah, again, we have a good idea of what we want to deploy, but not a perfect idea of it. So, we're going to make this a quick select. Going to get rid of everything except Blaze. Because again, I do want to keep her around for the sake of it, more or less. But yes, I know specifically that we want to use Pure Stream. We've been using Scavenger, and I don't see any reason not to use Scavenger. She's just pretty good. So I think we're going to keep up with that. As for our Lord that we wanted to use, again, we've sort of got the competition between Midnight and Frostleaf. But I think that Midnight is pretty much winning it. If we were to level up Frostleaf, she might have better attack, but 534 versus Midnight's 569. So yeah, so Midnight is still going to have better attack. Yeah, better attack stat. Their attack interval should be the same. So yeah, I think we want to use Midnight because he's going to just do more damage, basically. Yeah, in addition, his skill is purely damage focused. Where'd Midnight go? Do I already have him on the team? Yes, I do. But yes, anyway. Midnight's skill is purely damage focused, where Frostleaf's also has a slow. Yeah, either of them have a slow on them. In fact, I don't... Okay, yeah, Frost Tomahawk does do more damage, but it doesn't do that much more damage. Yeah, again, the main focus of Frostleaf's skills is less on killing and more on slowing. So yeah, so I think Midnight, we're going to use him to deal with the casters. I think we're going to keep using Waifu to, in theory, silence some slugs. Again, I haven't used specialists a whole lot. Snowsant, again, also specializes in silencing slugs. I say that as though Waifu specializes in silencing slugs. Waifu can silence whatever she wants. Snowsant can only silence infected creatures. But yes. So again, other units could definitely be of use to us. Again, I've just never really strongly considered the use of non-guard and non-defender melee units. Because again, another misapprehension that I was under for a long time is that specialists, that you could deploy on melee or ranged tiles would probably have significantly less defense and HP than guards. And while certainly a lot of guards have pretty high HP and defense, it isn't necessarily universal. So let's, Moose has 331 defense, for instance, and Shaw then has 302, which is less, but, it's not that much less. Plus, Shaw also has a passive that gives her resistance. Not a whole lot, but yeah, so Shaw, she's got some things going for her. She has pretty comparable attack. Oh yeah, we were also going to put Moose on the team. Did I say attack? I'm at HP. Yeah, 1782 for HP versus 1732. But yeah, so again, Shaw is slightly less well defended in general than Moose, but only very slightly. But yeah, the push could be useful. Yeah, slowing enemies could be useful, but I do think that I don't know. I'm not super sold on that specifically. One thing I was thinking about is potentially making use of Kazemaru, because I don't know if her substitute, I don't know if she's frozen while she, yeah, if she triggers her ability to swap out for a substitute while she is frozen. I don't know if that will then, I don't know if that, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know if the substitute that she summons will also be frozen. There we go. Yeah, that's something I kind of want to look into. I already have Scavenger on the team. I already have Midnight, Airstream. We need another medic. I don't know if there's anyone that would be especially good. Perfumer feels kind of good because she has the ability to, you know, heal completely passively. But in theory, we don't want to plan around our medics getting frozen because they shouldn't be getting frozen. If they are getting frozen, then things are very bad for us. So I think Hibiscus could be good just because she heals a lot more per heal. Then of course we need Meteor and Steward as established. I think Steward is pretty non-negotiable because again, we're not going to have any other casters that have the same targeting priority as him as far as I'm aware. And I say again, as far as I'm aware, because I'm not aware very far. But yeah, I have been looking into the units a little bit. I've been putting together a spreadsheet of just sort of some basic observations about each unit. Yeah, their categorizations, you know, their classes, subclasses, and a few notes about what sets them apart, what makes them unique. But yeah, I haven't put a whole lot of time into that because I have been slightly extremely distracted by Uma Musume, which I was always planning to play it, but I didn't expect that I would enjoy it quite as much as I did. We're probably going to play that on stream at some point. It's not going to become a series, I don't think. Like, I'm not going to try to... I don't know, it's not going to be a game that I focus on too much, but it's something I might play every now and again, the same way that we were doing with, say, Guilty Gear. But yeah, anyway. So like I was saying, Steward is going to be pretty important, as is Meteor, because again, so far we've not seen another reasonable solution for dealing with the Frost Drone. Yeah, it could also, in theory, we could also probably kill it faster with Glaucus. But she also has the damage bonus against drones, and she also prioritizes drones. And she does arts damage, of course. So even though she wouldn't be able to be deployed anywhere that, she definitely would not be able to be deployed anywhere that would not be within the drone's freezing range. She would still be able to deal pretty reasonable damage to it. Counter EMP. Would we want counter EMP or binary reload? I think binary reload, because that way she could focus on it while also applying DPS to other things. Honestly, it could go either way. We could use Steward and Glaucus instead of Meteor, or we could use Glaucus instead of Steward. But yeah, 125%. So her attack is 454. Steward's is much higher. Plus his skill would give him a lot more DPS. I think Meteors, we're going to swap her out for now. Try this once we get around to this. Again, we're not doing it today. But yes. So, just to look at our team here real quick. You've got Blaze, the obligatory Blaze. Moose, yeah. So we're using Kazemaru in place of a guard, basically. I don't know if we'd place her behind Moose or behind, in front of, I'm not sure. We'd place her either near Moose or near Blaze, because I'm thinking Blaze would be on the top row, Moose would be on the bottom, as stated. I think since Moose only blocks one, we might actually want to put a defender behind her. Yeah, she only blocks one and she only attacks one. So a defender of some variety would be useful. Gummy could be good, just because Gummy is generally good. Yeah, Gummy. Why not?
Gummy, ready to go.
I said less reliance on defenders. I didn't say no defenders ever, necessarily. I was planning on no defenders ever, if I could, but we're not that married to the idea of not using any defenders whatsoever. But yes. So, with that, we now have one more slot to fill, and I'm not sure what to put in it. So again, Blaze, Kazemaru. I don't know. I guess again, if we are having... What would we want to do? I guess we could place Kazemaru in front of Blaze, again, if we're using Kazemaru to try and sort of bait freezes and deaths and whatnot. I guess we could also put her in front of Moose. I don't feel like that would be very effective now that I think about it. I was thinking that, you know, once she drops and gets replaced by her substitute can't block, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Because then you have to deal with the issue of the substitute not blocking anything and everything that Kazemaru was previously blocking, then entering into Moose's territory, which if she's already occupied blocking something is going to not turn out very well. So yeah, so in terms of, I guess Gummy does have, no, I was going to say she probably has relatively high attack. Maybe she has relatively high attack for a defender, but she doesn't have very high attack in absolute terms. Oh yeah, we were also thinking about having a self-healing guard of some sort. I think Matoe Maru would do fine.
You all look pretty tough. How about a warm-up with me?
So yeah, so with that, I think we've got a pretty... Hold on. Another thought that I had is we could probably also... I don't know if I'd use Chilchuck specifically, but we could also probably use an agent. I guess it'd be Chilchuck or Cantabile. Cantabile, I think, would do more damage. Chilchuck is more of a... I don't know if I'd say support, but he's not... Cantabile's more offensively focused, basically, is what I mean to say. I'm not that convinced that Cantabile is necessarily the choice that we want to make, but she's definitely worth considering. Yeah, give us some early DP while also putting damage on the casters. That's definitely worth considering. You know what? I like that. I've talked myself into it. Yeah, we are definitely going to need to level her up a lot, though, if we're going to make use of her at all. But yeah, so I suppose we'll do that. I suppose we are kind of playing Arknights now. Oh well. I'm not going to change the category at this point because we're not going to be here for very long.
So this is how it feels. To hold my life in my own hands.
Alright, whoops. We don't need to promote her again. So yes. So, Specular Reflection would be more useful if we plan to have her out longer. But I don't, basically. So we're going to keep on Penetrating Gaze, again, because we want to make use of her as a sort of ranged pseudo-executor to help deal with the casters and the slugs and whatnot. Yeah, she'd actually probably be a really good option for dealing with the slugs. The more I think about it, the more I feel like Cantabile is a really good choice here. Anyway.
I trust your judgment. You won't lead me astray.
Also, we need to level her up. And we might as well go all the way.
I'm a fast learner. Don't worry.
So yes, I'm glad one of us is. So yes, Sumatoe Maru also needs to be leveled up if we are to make good use of her. Whoops. Yes, if we are to make good use of her.
More fancy skills to beat those bad guys with.
More skills, you say? Well, I can't give you more skills, but I can give you better skills. So yes. So, Regeneration Beta will now give her 40% of her max HP, which is quite good. And every 24 seconds, which is also really good. But yes. I don't think we would want to use Demonic Power. It's probably decent, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a huge asset to us. Because again, I'm thinking of using her specifically for her ability to self-heal. Yeah, everyone else should be basically as good as they can... Oh, Pure Stream. Right, because Pure Stream can't actually apply status resistance until we promote her, so let's promote her, huh?
Am I getting a raise? With this promotion and salary increase, I'm well on my way to the top. I'll have to tell everyone back home the good news.
HR might not necessarily be pleased with all this salary increasing we've been doing lately, but needs must.
If the purpose is to gain experience,
We must survive this
faster to
mission.
put everything into practice?
But yes, we do need to put things into practice at some point, but we definitely don't have enough time for it today. So, a big thing to keep in mind, or a big thing to consider, is how we want to make use of Pure Stream specifically. So, Healing Waves or Life Spring. Healing Waves or Life Spring. So, Life Spring is not unlike Telopsis's Enkephalin in that it makes it so she heals a lot faster. It also makes her healing a lot less effective. She does heal faster than Telopsis. But yeah, it makes her healing less effective, and not by an insignificant margin either. But yeah, so this is a good way to sort of spread out her healing over a lot of targets for a long time, whereas Healing Waves is a good way to get sort of an emergency heal, which could be good and could be suboptimal, depending on timing, really. You have to be very careful with timing to get good use out of Healing Waves. Again, we can sort of play around, since she has a much wider range than other casters or other medics. We could potentially play around with the idea of trying to have her... have her covering both the front and the back line at the same time, possibly. Yeah, if we wanted to do that, I think that Life Spring would probably be more useful. I don't know. I think that if we're in an emergency situation, I think Life Spring would be a little bit more useful. Healing Waves, again, allows us to heal everyone immediately and apply status resistance to everyone immediately. But if we're spread out enough, again, we don't necessarily need to worry about everyone getting frozen all at once. I think Life Spring is going to be better for consistent healing. So we're going to keep that on, or we're going to put that on.
No problem. Just leave it to me.
So yeah, so if we're going to play around the idea of Blaze potentially having someone in front of her, then we'd want Chainsaw Extension Module first. Or we'd want Chainsaw Extension Module more. Whoops. Yes, we would want Chainsaw Extension Module more. But if Blaze is going to be in front, then Power Strike is probably going to be better. Again, it also depends on how early we deploy Blaze. Because yeah, Chainsaw Extension... Pardon? Chainsaw Extension Module is probably just going to do give her better DPS overall once it activates. But again, we're not necessarily guaranteed to have it activate unless we deploy her pretty promptly. Power Strike is just more reliable in that sense. So yeah, we're going to leave it as such for now.
I got this. I know all about wiping out hostiles.
Yeah, we're going to leave it at that for now. If we decide that, or if in our practice we learn that Blaze is more effective, if we have enough margin that we can deploy Blaze early, we can switch her over to Chainsaw Extension module. But I think if we're not placing her as one of like our first few units, probably Power Strike is going to be better. I've been wrong before though, so yeah. So I think this is a pretty decent lineup. I think we've got a pretty decent set of units that we could use, but I also think we're not going to use them right now because it is time to wrap up. So yes, so let us wrap up again, as I was saying. So again, as per usual, if anyone has any raid suggestions, I would be delighted to hear them. If not, I can find a target on my own. And so, while we are doing this, while I'm waiting, we will go over the business. So yes, so tonight has been talking about Arknights and then adjusting some things in Arknights. Yes. Then we're not streaming Tuesday, we're streaming Wednesday. Wednesday will be some more Atelier Yumiya. Then on Friday, still a little bit undecided. I'm torn between whether I want to do more, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm torn between whether I want to play Guardians of Azuma or Uma Musume. Honestly, I think Guardians of Azuma. I'm leaning more towards that right now. I want to play Uma Musume more, but I also want to keep up with the series that I've done, basically. So Uma Musume isn't going anywhere. It will be around whenever I feel like getting to it. But yes. So then, Saturday, Arknights. Then we will finally put into practice what we have discussed here. And yeah, so I think that should wrap us up for today. So yeah, so I'm not seeing any raid suggestions. So I think tonight we're going to go and visit Sroka VTube, who is playing a game that I have not heard of before, looks like, by the name of, what was it? There we go. Yes, Upwards Rain, the Post Office of Farewells. But yeah, no idea what that is, but it sounds interesting. But yes, whoops. Raid, Sroka VTube. Always need to be careful. I'm always inclined to say Sroka VTuber, but that would be incorrect. Alright, so yes, the customary raid message is, as always, we have arrived. And so, I feel like there's something else I'm missing. Oh, right, so the time for the streams. You can expect all streams to be at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, except for the Wednesday stream, which you can expect to be around, the Wednesday stream, which you can expect to be closer to 8 p.m. Central Time. Though again, I will start that as early as I can. So yes, with all that then, thank you all for being here tonight. I hope that you've had a fine night. I hope that you will continue to have a fine night every night. And I hope that you will be well until the next time I see you. Thank you all very much, and farewell. Let us get this raid underway.